Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Shut Up and Do It podcast. I'm your host, Nick Aalerud, a principal with AA Real Estate Group here in the Boston area. And we are live today with a colleague of ours, Jean Guarino, who is founder of Residential Assisted Living Academy. That's the premier source for education in owning, operating, and investing in residential assisted living and senior housing. Jean's trained thousands of people from across the country how to turn single-family homes into cash flow machines. I like that, right? Yeah. RAL Academy's motto is do good and do well, which goes along well with our own personal core values. Jean has written 4 books, hosted 3 radio shows, and has spoken in 5 countries and over 50 cities in the last year alone. Guys, we're super excited to have Mr. Jean Guarino on the show. Jean, thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's awesome. We'd love it if you take a few minutes to just, tell us your story. How'd you get into what you're doing now?
Yeah, whenever people ask that question, I go all the way back to when I was 16 years old. I started giving drum lessons. I was a professional musician, music school, recording studio. By the time I was 18, I had already been a tenant for 2 years. My brother and myself were renting a building from a guy. He was a terrible landlord, and the house is even worse. And we walked out on the front porch and said, we're either shutting it all down or we've got to get a new place. And that was the beginning of the real estate investing career. Looked up the street, saw a for sale sign, ended up buying the house, no money down. That was the very first house. Went on to another home and then commercial, and flash forward 40 years. And I'm doing just one thing right now, which is residential assisted living.
That's okay. That's a good foray into it. Asset classes. You started there, you ended up in residential assisted living. How did you get there?
Yeah, with the first place, it was a home that we converted for business use. So it was mixed use. We had the business as well as our living space in it. Then it was fix and flip, which I think a lot of people start in real estate in their career with fix and flip because it's sexy, it's fun, it's fast, it's easy, but you're unemployed as soon as you sell it. So that's the part that's bad. Then you say, you know what, I want residual income. So you do buy and hold, and that's what I did. And making $100 a month is cool when you're 18 years old, and it doesn't pay for a round of golf when you're 58. So, the reality is you move along in life with what you need at that moment in time. And what I was looking for was significant residual income, not $100, not $1,000, but what is the monthly number that you need to pay your bills and be financially free? And for me, I picked $10,000. And if I could do that, I'm done. I'm free, and I can do whatever I want or not. And then I realized I had heard about this, what I do now, 20 years ago. There was a guy in front of a room, and he was saying senior housing, baby boomers, the place to be. And I ran up to him and I said, tell me more. And he said, well, I can't. I don't do it. I'm telling you, you should do it. And I said, oh, you're disappointed me, you guru up in the front. And so I said, could you at least tell me, show me somebody who's doing it? And everybody that I found at that point, Nick, was either unwilling to share, they were doing it badly and didn't have anything positive to share with me, or they were doing it and they weren't willing to share because they thought I was going to take their business. So when you think about senior housing, millions of people every single year need what we have. That's ridiculous, but that's the limiting mindset that some people have. But that was a long time ago. My interest kind of went down. My focus went in other places. But when my own mother started to need help, that's when things really became real. Because now it's not real estate, it's not money, it's mom. And once we realized that we had a problem, we couldn't find a place we felt good about, I said, we got to create it, a place that I'd be proud to have my own mother in, where she's going to be taken care of in a comfortable situation, not a big box facility where she's left in a room by herself for hours or even worse, and something that we can be proud of. And once I did it, immediately people were asking me to show them how, and that's how the whole academy began. So I own and operate. I teach people how to, but it started with single family homes. It was for our own purpose. Then it was fix and flip. Then it was buy and hold. Then it was small commercial, full circle, back to single family homes, but now making $10,000 a month or more from just one single family home.
That's awesome, Jean. On assisted living, things that I'm learning quick. It's funny you mentioned that about your mom, because I'm honestly in that exact same position right now. I was not interested in that asset class, except for hearing you, of course. And, my mother is getting to that point, and we are not really happy. So I'm, facing that same challenge. Operating, though, and starting and operating versus just buying and developing is in a completely separate business. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you kind of come into that or get into that business?
Yeah. And everybody who's listening, you really got to think about it there's 2 different parts, the real estate part and the business part. You can make money on either or both. I do both, and I recommend, suggest, encourage you to do both. But the real estate play is simple. You own the real estate, you lease it to the operator. You can charge anything you want, but you typically will charge more than the fair market rent. You'll have a longer lease, maybe 5 years instead of one. And you're going to have people that take care of the property, because the nicer the property, the more their residents are going to pay. So the real estate is a great play, but that's relatively passive and simple. Over here, the business part, that's got all the moving parts, and that's where you make the really big money. So the business part, that's something that you and I, before the broadcast, were talking about. What should you learn? What are the mistakes? What do you want to avoid? And all those things. That's critical stuff, because there are things you can do, should do, shouldn't do, would never do. And you need to learn those things before you even begin in this venture. But real estate and business.
Real estate and business, absolutely. And I'm assuming Eugene can't do everything at the same time. The real estate, the operations. I'm assuming you probably have a team built, right? Or strategic partners?
Yeah, when I started this whole thing, my goal specifically was not to be a hands-on operator. You know, people ask me all the time, Nick, where they say, well, you can't do it hands-off. It's not a passive investment. And I'm like, hold it. Are you telling me the guy who owns McDonald's is behind the counter if the manager doesn't show up flipping fries? No. He's organized it so that he owns the building or owns the real estate, owns the franchise. They have managers. The managers hire employees. So that's the way I've done it, is creating a system so that you don't have to be hands-on. I'm very specifically hands-off. I'm involved with the business. I understand what's coming in and what's going out, but I'm not there filling in to be a caregiver. I'm not cooking food. I'm not taking care of the seniors and so on. That's not the part I play.
Gotcha. But when you learned and you opened your first one, right, you probably, did you have some maybe growing pains or learning challenges that you experienced as you went through it?
No, Nick, everything went perfectly fine and there was no challenges at all.
That's why we don't even have a Shut Up and Do It podcast, because everybody goes swimmingly all the time, right?
That's so funny. But, you know, when I first got started, there was nobody to learn it from, and that's kind of the point. So the only way that I could do it was to buy an existing business. That was the fastest way, not the only way, to buy an existing one and say, okay, let me dissect this thing and figure out what works and isn't working, what's good and what's bad. Now, that's expensive, painful, heart-aching. Most people wouldn't make it. They wouldn't survive it. But I didn't have a choice. So that's what I did. But I did it immediately knowing that I'm buying it from somebody, but I don't want to be the manager or the caregiver, hiring immediately that person who's going to be the manager to take over the daily operations. So bringing them into position, because they know the operator that I hire knows the business better than I do, have them come in. My job is to go find the next location, right, and start the next one, which is exactly what I did. So he came in, and when I say he, my manager originally was a guy who used to be a medic in the Army, came out, became an LPN, a licensed practical nurse, was a caregiver one-on-one with an individual for about 7 years. Then he started to manage care homes, and that's when I hired him on and said, okay, I want you to come work with me. We're going to do multiple homes. I want you to oversee the caregivers and then raise up some caregivers that they can become managers so we can expand, and that's what we did.
Awesome. Yeah, it's all about a solid team. All the successful real estate and business operators, we need the team to behind us. So part of this podcast, Gene, this is the Shut Up and Do It podcast, and most of our guests have had a personal or professional challenge that they like to share. And I'd like to ask you if you'd like to share yours with us and how you either overcame it or how you're still going through it now.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. We just went through the end of the year. We're at the beginning of the year. And if you haven't, if people are listening and they haven't done this yet, hopefully you've taken an assessment of what you did last year, what you expected to do, what you actually did, what you want to do, what you could do, and you're bringing it forward. You're saying, okay, let's get real. Well, one of the things that keeps coming up, Nick, the older I get is, you know, my own kids. I've got 4 kids and 2 grandkids, and I was at the CG event, if I'm not mistaken, and a gentleman talked about 18 summers. I don't know if you remember that conversation at the last one, but basically they have 18 summers with your kids as they're growing up. And I thought to myself, I am so blessed because I work with my kids. They're all a part of the company and what we're doing right now. And those 18 summers, you know, my oldest is 30 and my youngest is 22. The 22-year-old's finishing college, but the other 3 and my son-in-law, daughter-in-law, future son-in-law, they all work with me. So I'm getting to spend a lot of quality time with them and teaching them lessons that you can't teach a 6-year-old about things, but you can teach a 26-year-old about things. And it's just a really cool point in life. So my challenge is that I think a lot of us, and this was a real theme at that last event, if I'm not mistaken, was a lot of people saying, I'm working really hard. I don't want to neglect the family. And I think no matter what you do, you're going to feel that way. Like, I could have done more, should have done more. But the reality is, when you're 40 to 60 years old, you're grinding, you're working, it's your most productive years. And that's typically when your kids are there too. So it's a tough thing. And that song, when I was a kid, some of you remember it, was Cats in the Cradle. And that song itself, if you don't know it, look it up online, put the headphones on and start crying now. It's true, and it's the reality of it all. So I just want to encourage those that are going through something. If you feel like you missed out on your kid's childhood, or you weren't there as much as you wanted to be, and so on, you can still do it. Now, there's a part B to this, if you're okay with that, Nick.
Absolutely. No, huge share, yeah.
Yeah, my kids are going to listen to you more than they listen to me. And your kids are going to listen to me more than they listen to you. And that's just the reality of the fact. So the other big encouragement I have for you is to give yourself the opportunity to put your kids in an environment where they can be positively impacted by some pretty neat, impressive people. So for my son, my oldest son, I have 2 older daughters, and then my oldest son, when he came with me on an event, it was with the real estate guys. It was a cruise, and that's a pretty good come on the cruise with us. So he was there. It was my oldest son, my youngest son, and my wife and I, we were there. But he had a chance to meet Robert Kiyosaki. And so he's talking to Robert Kiyosaki, and Kiyosaki's talking about me. And my son's eyes are lighting up, and he's thinking to himself, what is he talking about my dad for? What's that about? And he realized it's like, Robert's looking at me saying, this guy is the expert in assisted living, and I'm asking him for advice over here. He's listening to Robert Kiyosaki saying, okay, he's saying my dad is important, has some knowledge that I don't have, so I respect him, so he must have something for me to say. And it just was life-changing for him. He had the same experience with Tommy Hopkins, a sales professional, real estate sales professional. He has literally trained over 5 million people over his career in his lifetime. But with Tommy, it was the same thing. My son was at the point of, should I become a realtor? And I'm thinking, no, don't. Be an investor, be in the business, don't pick up tips But one of Tommy's advice was, be your biggest client, be your best client, right? So don't just do it for others, do it for yourself. But he encouraged my son to the point where when he went into the world of being a real estate agent, in his first years, he didn't do $1 million worth of sales, he did $10 million worth. And that's really impressive at any age, let alone when you're in your early 20s. But it was because he was focused and driven and inspired by people around him.
That's a huge give.
Yeah.
So for those of you guys listening in, we've never actually had a topic yet on balance and harmony, as some people would call it. And it's a tremendous, tremendous challenge for a lot of us, right? Because right now, like if I'm working, there's always in the back of my head a little guilt that I'm not with my kids, right? And if I'm with my kids, I know that's where I'm supposed to be, but there's that guilt that I'm not out grinding and hustling and trying to provide. And I think we all go through that. And the fact 18 summers, which is a great theme, and surrounding your kids with other people that are influential and seeing them interact directly, huge give on that, Gene. So that's cool. That's very cool. So just curious on your side, we have another session on this with planning and goal setting. While it's late in the game, when you look back, how did you feel 2019 went, and where do you see 2020 going for yourself?
Yeah, for myself personally, we have like 5 different companies. So I'm going to say, I'll talk about the education company with what we do with the RAL Academy. We reached our goal financially, but it wasn't as big as I wanted it to be. But where we really crushed the goal is the team, getting the team in place and ready for expansion. And that's painful, hard, it's expensive, it's all that stuff. But I feel good about 2019, but I feel like we can absolutely ramp things up huge in 2020. My biggest challenge going forward is trying to keep the blinders on. There's so many things I want to do and so many companies I want to start that you can only do just so much. So capacity.
Bright Shiny Object Syndrome will not affect us, Gene. You and I are above that. Exactly.
No, I'm the one, but it's also finding the right people to put around you so I can create the idea and hand it off and go run and look at the next one. But there's so much opportunity right now. It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm doing. Yeah.
So you have your education business, right? RAL, and you also own and operate different facilities. Is it all in one specific area, or where is it that you're looking that you buy and operate?
The ones we own and operate myself are in Arizona. The ones that we invest in, those are around the country. The educational, that is, people come from all over the country, even internationally. They come to Arizona for the training. And then the investing side, we're going to start with that is across the country, but the projects that we're doing will be back in Arizona once again.
Gotcha. Very good. As a huge give that you can give our audience, maybe you could share with them like the 3 biggest lessons learned in assisted living, if you don't mind. That would be huge. Or any sort of big tips that you can provide. That would be awesome.
Yeah, when you asked me that question earlier, it's like, oh, I could go for 3 days on this, right? Of all kinds of things.
All right, then give us 10. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll go with 3, and this is for you because I know you're working on a project right now. But the number one thing when it comes to where it's the location is critical. So when I say location, pick a planet, pick a country, pick a state, pick a city, pick a neighborhood. Now I've got my where. Step 2 in this process is find out the rules of the game. You don't need to change the rules. You just need to figure out what they are. And people who aren't in what I do, they look at it and go, oh, you got all this regulation and red tape. It's like, good, you guys stay out then, because if you're not willing to go through the barriers to entry, I'm fine with that. More for me, less for you. But learning the rules of the game, you don't need to know. I know the rules for all over the country in different cities. All you need to know is one city. Which city? What are the rules of the game? And then from there, I think my third, because there's so many things I could share, my third, I got to give you at least one more after this. But my next one is just don't do it all yourself. I think any entrepreneur listening here, yeah, you're right. You can do it all. But the reality is you can't do it all. You're not the best at doing it all. And if you just can bring other people around you, and if they can do it 80, 90% as well, you'll accomplish so much more. So don't, in the assisted living, don't be the manager. Don't be the caregiver. Don't be the handyman. Don't be stupid. Have other people do those things so that you can go off and start the next business. So one more. This is just a general business one. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is being undercapitalized. I've had dozens of businesses in the last 40 plus years. And the reality is one big mistake that most people make is undercapitalization. And really what that comes down to is they're not aware, they're ignorant of it takes money to get through this process. So when you start up a business, you have negative cash flow. The question is, how big is that negative hole going to be? That's the amount of reserve you need. If you don't know that up front, you don't raise the capital for it here, you're going through this process and it gets incredibly painful. Then you got to go back and scrounge and find it. Some people never make it out of that process. But if you knew it, I need 50 grand in reserve, and you borrowed that up front or got a line of credit for it, life is good. But it took me lots of businesses and lots of years to learn that lesson. But don't make my mistake.
That's a good one. On assisted living specifically, I know in multifamily real estate, we look to try to have, when we turn over, let's say like a 24 unit building, we'll have a between 6 month, but more than likely 12 to 14 month stabilization period, as we call it, where it's certainly negative cash flow and it's not break even yet at the meantime. Is that similar to an AL? Like you want to make sure you have that 12 to 14 month reserve for capital?
Oh, not that much reserve or capital, but let me similar. So here's what I mean by that. If it's brand new, you bought the house, you've renovated it, you're licensed, you're open, figure it's going to be 2 new residents a month. So if you're licensed for 10, it's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It'll take you 5 months to fill. You should be at break even in what we do at 60 to 70% occupancy. So once you have 6 out of 10 beds full, you should be at break even and profitable. Everything after that is pretty much profit. Bed 7, 8, 9, 10. Bed 10, yeah, you're always going for full, but 90% is where you should base all of your numbers. 90% is kind of full, but you're always trying to be full. So really, you should be making 20 to 30% of the top line coming to your bottom line. Now, I went through that whole example for you because, yeah, you need to have reserve, but it doesn't cost the same to start it as it does to operate it. So at the beginning, I don't have any food costs. I don't have any caregivers to pay. But once I get the first resident, now all of a sudden I have to pay for caregivers, a little bit of food. All the utilities have to be paid day one. So you need to understand that whole process from beginning of I've got the property through the renovation, licensing, opening, filling. And once we're at 60, 70%, we should be good from there and off to the races, as they say.
Awesome. That's great. And I'm sure as part of your academy, you probably offer all those calculations, Excel sheets and guidance and all that, right? I'm assuming?
Oh yeah, we go through it all. I have so much fun doing the training. It's funny because out of all the things I do, Nick, that is the most fun thing. We do it 8 times a year. It's 3 days at a time. This one coming up is going to be our biggest training ever. We're going to have 70 people that are there, and about 30, 40 of them have brought partners with them. So over 100 people in the room, and we do it 8 times a year from all over the country. I love doing it. I love to teach. We have a team of 10 that come out for the training to teach and help. People learn so much and they love it, and we love doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. It's definitely a need. I myself, just again, the Northeast, am definitely seeing the need. And while AL is not the same as senior housing, we know that it's very different. But when you still go, and we have our motivated sellers where we help them on the single family side and are trying to place them into a new location because they're no longer can do stairs, and we're trying to help them. For senior housing, the wait list is 10 years in Boston proper right now. Like you can't, of course, but there's Boston. You already know somebody who knows somebody, and you grease some wheels and you can get to the top of the list. But it's still a challenge, right? Like this, where the generationals are. Is that accurate? Would you say?
Well, I'm going to say that's on the far end of it, but let me explain the why. That's kind of like getting a ticket to a Patriots game these days, right? Or something like that. It's like,
we don't want to talk about Patriots right now. Ooh.
He's going to sign on for 3 more years. You know he is. All right. But, one of the reasons why the Northeast in general, New England, is because they do make it more difficult there, more complicated there. I always call it the good old boys network because I'm originally from upstate New York. And I just wish I could just say to them, it's like, just who do I pay? What is it, $2,000? Who do I give it to? Let's just get past the baloney here. But no, you can't do that. And it's a good old boys network. But there are rules and regulations you have to follow. That's one of the reasons why a place like Mass is that way. It's not just Boston, it's Mass, that they make it more complicated there. So you get through the gauntlet, you got a lot of business coming your way.
That's it. Gene, before we close out, we usually like to ask a few different questions of all our guests. And these were not prepared beforehand, so you don't know what they are. Okay. But this one, I use it a lot because it's one of my favorites, and I want you to try to see if you can answer it. What has been your favorite purchase under $100? And while you can't say a book, but I don't want you to say a book because everyone has bought a book. So give us something electronic or something in your office or something that you use for home life, $100 or less.
There's so many directions I can go, but you can probably see that. I'm going to grab it right here. This right here in the background, when we talk about favorite purchase, this goes back to the family thing. This right here is a piece of artwork that I created, and that's not the point. The point is it was a part of what we do called forced family fun. So take your $100. My best gift is we get together between Christmas and New Year's, and the kids all pick an activity. That one was wine and art. So wine and art. You go to the place where you drink wine, you make art, and what does that cost? $20? So to have your family of 5 do it, there's your $100. What did you do? You spent 2 hours together. You talked, you wined, you dined, you did things you wouldn't do. My experiences that I had during forced family fun were my best investment.
Forced family fun. I love it. And we're, a huge proponent, experiences over things, right? Always, always, always. I'll take that as a great answer. So that's very good. Gene, I can't thank you enough for being on with us today. Wait, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about what you guys have going on?
Yeah, I appreciate you very much inviting me on, and I want to give everybody a free book and access to some webinars if they want to learn more about the Residential Assisted Living Academy. So it's a real simple website. Get ready to write it down. I'm sure it's in the show notes if not, but RAL101.com. So RAL, which is Residential Assisted Living 101.com. If you go there, you can download my latest book, which is the Insider's Guide to Investing in Assisted Living. And then you can also get access to some webinars. And if you want to have a conversation, you can sign up for that. And we'll do that as well.
That's fantastic. Gene, I can't thank you enough for being on here with us today. I know you're a busy guy, and it's cool to share what you've shared with everybody.
You got it. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it, everybody.
Guys, thank you again for listening to another episode of the Shut Up and Do It podcast. Please be sure to like and subscribe below and send your friends to the shutupanddoitrealestate.com website. We will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks so much.